turn left, then in about 300 yards, turn right. In about 300 yards, turn left. Turn left. Starting route guidance to your destination. Turn left. Voice guidance off. Voice guidance on. Starting route guidance to your destination. Turn left.
Back to Cento Passi wines.
I've heard very good things about this wine, but I've never actually had a chance to taste it, so here we go.
John Dickey has spent a big portion of his career researching the mafia and trying to understand why it flourished in Sicily. Now he's about to take his first sip of a wine that could be a taste of its demise.
Yeah, that's really good. It's really good. It doesn't need to sell itself, appeal only to the conscience. I think this one can appeal to your palate as well. Yeah, I mean, it's deeply like savage bosses that the Sicilian mafia has ever known. Should be a toast, really. I think Abbasso la mafia is the best.
Translates as
down with the mafia.
The food programme was presented and produced by Dan Saladino. Mark Mardell will have the world...
In about 400 yards, keep to the right.
Before that, let's hear about the weather from Thomas Schaffenecker.
Seb, thanks very much. Well, today the weather's looking absolutely smashing across a large chunk of the UK, particularly across England, where we've got the lion's share of the sunshine, especially in the south and the east, and that's how it's going to stay through most of this afternoon. There is a little bit of cloud in England here and there, but most of us should have the sparkling skies, and if anything, perhaps a little bit of cloud developing during the course of the afternoon, but that's pretty much it, just fair weather cloud. Across the rest of the country, we've got a little bit more cloud, so let's have a look at the details then for the rest of today. And we'll start with Scotland, because across the north of Scotland and the Western Isles, we've got thicker cloud here. It's rolling off the North Atlantic, and it's even bringing a little bit of spot of drizzle in one or two places, but even here the clouds from time to time will break up. So
Starting route guidance to your destination. In about 400 yards, turn left. Then there is a roundabout. Take the second exit.
For Northern Ireland, here too rather cloudy through the afternoon, but from time to time the sunshine should poke through. And across Wales, it's particularly in the north of Wales, so around the Llŷn Peninsula, Anglesey, throughout mid-Wales where we have a bit more cloud. The south of Wales, say around Cardiff and Swansea, here you've got more sunshine than cloud. Now today's temperatures will range from around 20 degrees in the London area to 16 or 17 in most other major towns and cities, a bit cooler in Belfast 15 and only 13 degrees for example in Orkney and Shetland. And then as far as tonight's concerned, not quite as cold as last night. Last night temperatures dipped down to close to freezing in one or two places across England and Wales. Tonight more like 4 or 5 degrees in rural spots, 10 degrees in town. And then tomorrow, a bit more overcast across the eastern half of the UK. So places like Newcastle, Leeds, Sheffield, London, probably a bit more cloud, whereas further west it should be brighter. And as far as the outlook's concerned for the week ahead, it's actually looking very settled. Rain might be heading our way towards Friday.
Thanks, Thomas. Tonight, Liz Barkley will share her bit of the past week's radio.
This week, Donald Duck saves the day. David Sedaris owns up to turtle mistreatment and an alternative view of Cecil the Lion's demise. There's a big argument about vinyl, alphabetical or by genre. And also on vinyl, wavelength, enlightenment and cleaning windows. Can you name that musician in one? He turned 70 this week and the tributes are stupendous.
Turn
If you
left,
haven't worked
then
it out,
there is a
join us
roundabout.
on fan.
Take the
Me,
second
Liz Barkley,
exit.
on Pick of the Week this evening at 6:15.
And that's here on BBC
Turn left now.
Radio 4.
Take
Welcome
the
to the
second
world of
exit.
cricket with me, Mark Mardell. As David Cameron promises to take thousands more Syrians directly from camps in the Middle East, we're live in Lebanon. I visited refugees in the Bekaa Valley.
I need help from Germany, from any government to help us. Please help us. Please help us.
There are more than 1 million Syrian refugees in this small country, and many now want to leave. But should this just be Europe's problem?
We look for Arab countries, especially the Gulf states, where you can easily find a job. We applied for Saudi Arabia 6 times, and what we got was just rejection.
In about 400
senior
yards,
minister
bear
told us this
left.
country
Then
is
there is a
there for
roundabout. Take the third exit.
All in all, living on our territory, in a country that has a population of 4 million people, we simply cannot handle anymore.
And after an agonising week, those on the move find a welcome in Europe.
We happy in Germany, but we tired, very tired, because that's very dangerous. In 1 month, Turkey and Greece and Serbia, Hungary.
The BBC News is read by Jane Steele.
Bear left at the second turning. Then there is a roundabout. Take the third
Hungary
exit.
opened its border to let the refugees through on Friday. Around 7,000 people have already arrived in Munich. Others have been taken by special trains to Hamburg, Dortmund and Dresden. Our correspondent Bethany Bell is on the border of Hungary and Austria near Nickelsdorf, where she witnessed the attempts of ordinary Austrians and charity workers to do their bit to help some of the refugees.
A convoy of around 150 cars from Vienna has just crossed the border into Hungary. It's made up of activists and private individuals who say they want to help. They're planning to pick up migrants there and drive them to Austria. One of them, a woman called Angelika, told me she was going because Europe's policies have failed refugees who need help. Last week, 4 Austrian activists who tried to bring across migrants were arrested on charges of people smuggling. They were later released. Police in Austria have advised the public not to take part in the convoy.
The cost of rehousing some Syrian refugees in Britain will be met in part from the foreign aid budget. The Chancellor, George Osborne, said that would help defray the costs incurred by local councils in the first year. The government will carry out an assessment to determine how many migrants British public services and infrastructure can support. David Cameron will set out his approach tomorrow. It's thought he'll offer to take refugees from camps in the countries neighbouring Syria. Here's our political correspondent, Alan Sodhi.
The international aid budget is protected from cuts and automatically increases in cash terms as the economy grows. The Chancellor said more of that money should be spent on the refugee crisis and its causes, and that would include compensating local authorities in areas where any new refugees from Syria were housed.
People here ask about the pressure on public services. We'll have extra money to help local authorities deal with that.
The Chancellor also said the government would be prepared to consider UK military action in Syria, but only if it could be sure it would receive the backing of MPs. 2 years ago, ministers were defeated in a vote on possible airstrikes in Syria. The Chancellor said that was one of the worst decisions the Commons had ever made.
The Pope has urged every Catholic parish, monastery and community in Europe to take in a family of migrants. 2 parishes in the Vatican will take the lead in the next few days. There are 25,000 parishes in Italy and 12,000 in Germany. 2 people have died after being stabbed at a care home in Ilford in northeast London. A man has been arrested. Daniel Bircher reports.
Police and ambulance crews were called to the residential care home in Ilford late yesterday evening after reports of an assault. They found a woman in her mid-50s and a man in his mid-80s. Both were pronounced dead at the scene. Detectives from the Homicide and Major Crime Command have launched an inquiry. A 50-year-old man has been arrested on suspicion of murder and remains in custody at an East London police station. Detectives say they believe both of the victims and the man who has been arrested were known to each other but not related, and that none of them was a member of staff at the home. Post-mortem examinations are to be carried out later this afternoon.
Some of the UK's leading charities say they've agreed a new code of conduct on fundraising to stop vulnerable donors being exploited. They'll introduce an opt-in system banning the details of donors being passed to other organisations without the individual's express permission. The United Utilities Water Company says it hopes it will soon be able to tell all the households which have been boiling their tap water in Lancashire for the last month that there is no longer any risk of contamination. 300,000 homes were advised their water was unsafe after cryptosporidium was discovered at a treatment works near Preston. Around 50,000 households are still having to boil their water.
Thanks, Jane. Welcome to Beirut. Lebanon is one of Syria's next-door neighbours and is the first port of call for many of those fleeing the civil war. The country, with a population half the size of London, has over 1 million Syrian refugees. It's little wonder they've left. This week, a UN human rights report says civilians in Syria are suffering the unimaginable. Transgressions of their human rights massive in both scope and extent. So, David Cameron has said that the UK will take some people directly from camps in the Middle East, and he'll give more details in the House of Commons tomorrow. I've been visiting the sort of places he's talking about, but first Bethany Bell is in Nickelsdorf in Austria, where thousands more refugees have been arriving this weekend. Bethany, what's happening now?
I've just seen in the last half an hour or so a convoy of around 200 cars that has driven from Vienna to Hungary, having to try and pick up migrants in Hungary and bring them into Austria. And I was speaking to a woman who's joining them, who's part of the convoy a little while ago, and she said that this is extremely necessary because she said she has to do something to help. She said she was watching the pictures of the refugees being held up at Budapest railway station, and she said she felt she needed to come and help. But this is a little bit risky, and the Austrian police are warning people joining this convoy that they could get arrested by the Hungarian authorities for people smuggling. The laws are such that to bring a migrant who doesn't have a passport or who doesn't have a visa to be in the EU is potentially allowing themselves to be open to those charges.
So a lot warmer welcome from Austria than Hungary, but is the welcome in Austria universally positive?
It's not universally positive. There is a far-right party here which has been saying that Austria already has too many foreigners. They say, of course, refugees could be helped, but Austria this year is expecting to take 80,000 asylum applications. That's about 1% of the population here.
In about 800 yards, there is a roundabout. Take the second exit.
I think we've lost Bethany there, and I'm sorry about the quality of that line. The British government says while some countries may take more refugees, it is pulling its weight because since 2012 it's spent £1 billion easing the crisis, helping refugees in the Middle East. At the end of last week, the Prime Minister...
In about 400 yards, there is a roundabout. Take the second exit.
But direct camps in Jordan and here in Lebanon. Certainly people are eager to leave. Life is increasingly hard. Food aid cut all the time, the borders closed, camps refuse permission to expand, work permits impossible to get. I've been to the Bekaa Valley first to see people in Esad Adlis.
Take the second exit.
The kids are turning cartwheels in the shadows of the mountains and by a maize field, and this is not a refugee camp. We mustn't call it that because the government doesn't like it. It's an informal settlement made up of about 80 or so tents, although I'm hesitant to use that word because they don't look like normal tents. They're wooden structures covered with plastic. Some of them have got UNHCR logos on them, but others are obviously just sort of adverts. So how long does it take to build a structure like this?
شي 15 أو 20 يوم. Around 15 days.
The deputy chief of this camp is Walid, and he's been showing me around, and we're now going into Ghazia's tent. So inside it's much cooler, but pretty basic concrete floor, a little small sofa in one corner of the room, surrounded by this plastic sheeting on wooden frames that have just been put up. A little gap in the wall, and I can see through there and into the other room, a baby lying there on a mat, surrounded by cushions. Hello? Assalamu alaikum.
This woman and her husband are applying from here to travel, and they can travel as long as she travels from Lebanon
to Europe.
Yes, it's a difficult living condition.
يعني أنا مرضان بدسك يعني قليل يشتغل.
Her husband is sick and he can't afford food and.
So you'd rather live in Europe?
تفضل تعيش في أوروبا.
لا يعني مفضل يعني بس إذا رجع البلد مثله ونرجع على بلدنا.
She preferred to live in Europe, but if her country is still and no more war, she preferred to go to her
You'd
country.
rather go back to Syria if you could.
Yes.
This family's got 3 chickens running around in a pen and one running around rather wilder outside, pecking around looking for food. But completely unexpected, a beautiful little garden. Green plants and flowers, beautiful in orange and pink and red. It's very colourful. The ladies lined up outside looking at me again with some bewilderment. Can you tell her she's made this very beautiful?
She says she loves, in English to say the evening flowers.
Evening flowers, so they come out. Oh, and then you get the scent in the evening. Dibe tells me her husband lost his leg in the war and asked me inside to meet him. The British government scheme gives places to the most vulnerable victims of torture and rape, but Khalid Kalawi seems pretty vulnerable to me. His leg blown off by a rocket, his paper. The September sun. In winter, the snows come, bringing with them worse disasters than simply the freezing cold.
Last winter, 2 of his nephews, one 4 months and the other is 6 months, died due to the collapse of the tent over their head due to the snowy storm. Years ago, he was working in a laundry. One of the machines exploded and his veins were corrupted. Let me see your hand. If you can see, he can't lift anything.
His hand is slightly withered and there's like sort of big wound with stitches all down it. And do you know people who want to go to Europe? Do you understand people wanting to go to Europe?
Voice guidance on.
He knows about those people. Some are drowning and some are making it, but if it's legal, he will go. But he really wants to travel to Europe if someone can help him.
Which country do you want to go to?
بريطانيا, Almania.
Why do you want to go to a European country rather than stay in a country which has got closer culture to yours, the same language?
ليش بتفضل تروح على اوروبا، المانيا او بريطانيا بدل ما تروح على شي دولة عربية بتقدر تتواصل معهم وتحكي معهم يعني بلغتك؟
ما بيستقبلوا لغة
The
الخليج.
Arabian countries are not accepting any refugees.
I'm standing by a country road and behind me there's a hillside covered in white rocks and little scrubby bushes. But the important thing is just a few miles over the top is the Syrian border. If I turn round, there's a notice here with a big Union flag, UK aid from the British people, it says. Rehabilitation of agricultural roads, Marshad El Anjar village. And so there's another one of these settlements, wooden and plastic tents. But they're so near the Syrian crisis, the war that they've fled from, they could hear night after night the bombardment of a town just across the border.
Everything is destroyed. Our home, the life here is difficult. The child without a school, no food, everything.
That's Majid Ali in his 30s, the father of 4 children. The youngest 7-month-old twins. Life here at the Shadi Hussein camp is getting increasingly hard.
Maybe I will go to Germany Europe is better than here.
Would you like people to take you from here? Should European governments be organising something?
Every government in Europe must help us. My brother, since 3 days, go to Turkey. Then will he go to Germany or I don't know where he will go. But I need help from Germany, from any government to help us.
So your brother left here 3 days ago?
Yes.
How is he going to get to Europe?
First he go to Turkey, then no contact with him.
You don't know?
I don't know anything about him.
What would you say to the political leaders, to David Cameron, to Angela Merkel?
Angela Merkel, David Cameron is better than all leaders here in our country. No one help us. Please, I said to Angela Merkel, send maybe a boat, big boat to Turkey, to Adana, and give all the Syrian refugees to Germany. In Syria, I work in hospital, in school, I am technical laboratories, I work. Here, no, nothing. Please help us, please help us. This is my daughter, 9 years. This is my mother. Every time crying on my brother go to Turkey, and now every time crying without contact with him.
She's holding her hands to her face and crying. I'm sorry. And the children are showing me into this room with delight. It's a little square room with concrete floor and plastic roofing like all the others, but this has got lines of little pink chairs and posters, their hands in paint, and pictures of ice cream and an umbrella and flowers. And what's this? Oh, this is beautiful. You made this. It's like a house with a lovely red roof and blue walls on one side and green walls and a door. And the door opens? No? Oh well. The window's open. Who made that? You made that? That's very good. With me in the schoolroom, Eric van der Lee, who saved the children's manager in the Becker.
In about 800 yards, turn
Small
right.
learning space in this site that provides an opportunity for children, very young children that have been deprived from education for a long time since they fled Syria. Provide them a means to get some sort of education, and it's at the same time what we call a child-friendly space, where children can play, can learn, where they can actually play in a normal environment, and they can play together and socialize, let's say, with their peers basically. So this is what this place is. It's a small 3-classroom type of building that we did.
Because our government is always saying,
In about 400 yards, turn right.
refugees, but it does give lots of money, and I don't know, I guess I'm a bit of a cynic, but it does make a difference.
It definitely does make a difference. I think if you would talk to the people that are actually volunteering here, they can tell you what a difference it makes for the children that we have, in the classroom here.
And they seem so proud, the children.
They are very proud. If you look around, it's very depressing at times for children, and having this kind of space and close to their homes really provides them an opportunity to have a normal environment, or a normal-ish environment.
But since the British Prime Minister made the announcement about taking thousands more, he didn't give a number, have you seen any sign of organising to do that?
No, nothing yet.
As I'm leaving, one little boy
Take the second right
to me
turn.
in Arabic. I get him to repeat it to our translator. It said, I just want to get a good education. Back in Beirut, this tiny Syrian girl certainly isn't getting an education. She's selling tissues to passers-by. The majority
Turn right
of Syrians
now.
in Lebanon don't either beg or live under makeshift shacks covered in tattered plastic, but that doesn't mean life's easy for them. Raida was a tour guide in Damascus. She's fluent in 4 languages, but feels trapped.
I lived in the old city of Damascus, and I always felt safe there.
In about 400 yards, there is a roundabout. Take the second exit.
To be few months, and then we will go back to our work, because I was working as a guide in Syria. My husband also worked in tourism, but year by year things became very bad. Especially we have a child. For example, we couldn't send it to the school because most of the school have been bombed. The main reason was looking for
Take
a job.
the second exit.
We're not working.
The tourism just stopped.
Tourism just stopped, so we start looking for a shelter or a place that we move and work and have a safe place for our daughter. We found like all the doors were shut in front of us. We look for Arab countries, especially the Gulf states where you can easily find a job.
They weren't interested in helping.
For example, we applied for Saudi Arabia 6 times, and what we got was just rejection.
What does that make you think?
I'm very angry, really. I'm very upset because now when I saw all this news about the refugees crisis in Europe, I blame the Arab people. If simply Arab countries open the border in front of Syrian, you will not see all of these people going like this in Europe.
Obviously you speak fluent English, so Britain or America or Canada would be an obvious choice.
We applied for Canada, they refused our application. We applied to UK when we were in Damascus, and they refused our application. We applied when we were in Lebanon 5 times to Austria through friends in Austria, and they applied for us 5 times, and also we got rejection.
In about 800 yards, there is a roundabout. Take the first exit.
About 45 days, they refused our application. Both of us, we don't agree at all of smuggling to Europe. This is totally unacceptable for us, even if we don't have kids. I don't blame people what they are doing, but I can do it.
In about 400 yards, there is a roundabout. Take the first exit. Then there is a roundabout. Take the third exit.
Both about culture, but just about numbers of people.
I can understand because the culture is very different and they don't know about Syria. All what they brought in media talking about ISIS.
Take the first exit. Then there is a roundabout. Take the third
They don't know
exit.
what's going really on the ground. They don't know those people. They don't know us.
So you're skilled people who want to work, want to do things legally, but you just find your path is blocked.
Yes. We feel like everything surrounding us is so hard. I don't
Take
know
the
where
third
we
exit.
reach.
Then take the motorway entrance onto A1M.
Beirut, despite its tortured past and growing modern political problems, is probably the Middle East's most lively and cosmopolitan city. But the Syrian refugees feel ill at ease here, squeezed out, and that may have huge implications for the crisis in Europe. Anna Slayman is from UNHCR in Lebanon.
Humanitarian assistance is dwindling with time, and the reason is funding shortfalls, first and foremost. For example, the World Food Programme was distributing $27 per month per individual back in 2014. It decreased this assistance to $19 per person per month, and now we hit $13.5 per person per month. And we're not only talking about the assistance they're receiving, the protection space in Lebanon is shrinking. The government tells refugees you cannot work. They don't have job opportunities. They rely in big part on what they receive from the humanitarian community. That itself is not able to do more than what it's doing currently.
There's political hostility to them.
It would be unfair to say that because in Lebanon there's an exceptional story that must be told, and it's one of extreme generosity that I have witnessed firsthand throughout my 4 years here. But at the same time, tensions are increasing between the Syrians and the Lebanese, and it's due to the fact that basic services are strained in Lebanon, like water and electricity and education and healthcare, and we're talking about basic services that Syrians had access to inside Syria for free.
Now, David Cameron's plan seems to be to try to process people here rather than let them make that perilous journey across the Mediterranean so that they can be processed here, although we've no idea of the numbers. Have you heard anything about this scheme? Because presumably organisations like yours would be at the heart of it.
Well, it's still very premature to comment on the modalities and the way this is going to unfold, but any resettlement opportunities for Syrians and refugees in general is a welcome initiative.
So it's a good idea, but you haven't heard much about it yet.
We don't know much about it yet, but we welcome the announcement and we hope to collaborate with the British government further on this one.
Donald Slayman from UNHCR in Lebanon. Lebanon's education minister, Elias Boussab, has been pushing the idea that all Syrian refugee children should get a proper education. But when I spoke to him earlier, I put to him the criticisms we've heard that the Lebanese government and others were making it much harder for refugees living here.
Food aid being cut, that's something that we are discussing with the international community, with the United Nations, because that's not a good sign. While if we look at how the Lebanese government is dealing with that and closing its border, we are a country of 4 million people. We had about 500,000 refugees from Palestine prior to the Syrian crisis. Add to it 1.5 million that came from the Syrian crisis. So we have 2 million refugees or more living on our territory in a country that has a population of 4 million people. We simply cannot handle anymore.
You're at breaking point.
I think the entire country will collapse. Electricity this summer is at its worst. We are able to provide few hours of electricity every day for the Lebanese and the Syrians. The healthcare, the education is probably one of the most looked after ministry, if you want, by the international community. The schools are there, they exist. We just open double shifts, morning and afternoon shifts. We are going after every single child to put them in school, and I think this is where hope is for them.
When you say the country is on the point of collapse, some people listening might think that is politicians' exaggeration, but from what I've been hearing, it is a real and genuine fear.
This is not exaggeration by any means. Everybody knows the financial situation of this country prior to the crisis. So imagine now you are living with another additional 50% that are the poor of the poorest that are in your country, and you have to provide them with everything. All these are threats to the stability of the country, to the security of the country, because these people, if they don't have hope, if they don't go to school, if they don't get jobs, if you don't provide them with food, they will be out on the street. They could be potential terrorists, they could be in a camp, they could be anywhere.
And radicalization in unofficial schools is a worry here, I understand.
It is. When I first took on this responsibility, I made sure that every school should be controlled by the Ministry of Education, to make sure that the international community is not funding schools without knowing which curriculum they're delivering. I did get a report on a couple of schools that were
in about 2 miles, keep to the left onto A1.
Pakistan, which teaches extremism, and I had to put a stop to that, and I contacted all the international donors, and I informed them, please do not go fund people outside the legal channel, because you don't know who you're funding.
As important as education is, what else? What can the European Union, what can Britain do to help you with the refugee crisis? Because as you know, there is a great reluctance in some countries to take more people.
Most of the refugees go to Lebanon, Jordan and Turkey. Everything else is very moderate or very shy initiative that takes 7,000, 8,000, 10,000, in some cases 2,000 and 3,000. I'm talking about over 1.5 million in a country of 4 million people.
Should we be
in
less
about 1
shy?
mile, keep to the left onto
I would say,
A1.
if not less shy, more commitment to help the country that's hosting them, or the countries, more commitment to long-term help and aid, because if we are helping these children and we're struggling, I worked very closely with the former Prime Minister Gordon Brown. He is helping us tremendously with the international community to get all the funding. We were able to raise funds. Last year we raised funds, this year we raised funds, but we don't know next year if we will have funds. It's worrying. We don't know where we're heading next year or the year after. For sure these refugees will be on the Lebanese territory for many years. We don't know how many years. Even after they reach political
keep to the left
solution in Syria,
A1.
when they reach a political solution, it will take a few years to take them back. We don't want them to remain in Lebanon. We don't want them to stay here. Our country cannot afford that for many reasons. But as long as they are here, as long as they are on our territory, we have the responsibility of dealing with this. We have the responsibility of putting them in schools. We have the responsibility of sending them to the hospitals and to feed them. And we cannot do that without the international community long-term help.
Some people in the camps, a lot of people want to go to Europe, but some were outraged that there wasn't more help from the Gulf, from Saudi Arabia, from rich Arab countries who they feel should see them as their brothers and sisters.
We are trying. We are talking to the Gulf countries. We are trying to ask them to help more. I think they should help more. We will call on every single country that can help to help with the situation, because this will not be a crisis that Lebanon only will live with. This crisis will be spilling over many other countries. It can reach Europe even. When these people lose hope, when you lose an entire generation that is not educated, imagine a child is out of school for 3 to 4 years, it will be impossible to put them back in schools. So these are potential troublemakers. People who lose hope, they could be anywhere. So yes, the international community has this responsibility. During the war, there were a lot of funding for the arms. Billions of dollars were spent on the arms. Now it's time to pay for humanitarian work, to deal with these people that are out of their country as a result of the war and the billions of money that were spent on arms.
Elias Boussab. And that brings us to our closing headlines. As David Cameron prepares to flesh out his government's response to the Syrian refugee crisis, here in Lebanon the senior minister warns his country is close to collapse under the strain. The UK government has said the money will be diverted from its aid budget to help local councils support Syrian refugees. The weather cloud will spread across most areas by early this evening. Tonight will be mainly dry. Tomorrow mainly cloudy with sunny spells. Our studio director was Adrian Bagava, producer Jatinder Sidhu, the editor Johnny Bell. I'm Mark Muddell, and that's The World This Weekend.
And on Wednesday here on Radio 4, Edward Stone will continue to explore the migrant crisis in a special evening of programmes. Here's more.
No one now can shut their eyes or ears to the sights and sounds of this migration crisis.
We don't want to stay here. The police told me that Germany is closed here for. So where we go? Where we go?
I'm Edward Sturton, and in an evening of special programming, including drama and live debate, I'll be looking, of course, at what it means for the people living through it, but also at what it means for us. How should Britain respond? What are our moral obligations? What about the practical challenges of living up to them? Those are pressing questions which our leaders need to answer now, but what also about the long term? That's the Migration Dilemma on Wednesday evening at 8, and then available on the Radio 4 website.
Back to you this afternoon here on BBC Radio 4. Eric Robson and the Gardeners Question Time team will be in Liverpool at 2 o'clock. Before that, we continue the great songbook. Today, Keris Matthews is exploring the best love songs of 4 European nations. Our final stop is Barcelona and the great Spanish songbook.
It sounds quite unusual, but as a child growing up, the Paso Doble loomed large. My father was a huge bullfighting fan for his sins. And I never did quite understand the violence, of course, but it was the music that intoxicated me. And I came to Spain as soon as I turned 18 to find out more. But I'm back 28 years later. I'm looking over Las Ramblas, and I want to find out if we can identify songs that would make the great Spanish songbook, and also ask what those songs tell us about the history of this great country. Barcelona is full of tourists, buskers, and there's even a row of castanet sellers. But when I ask some of the local people what songs they know, they look at me with polite bewilderment.
They didn't like music. I didn't like music. I don't think they like my hat or me. La bien pagada. Me llama la bien pagada. Dale tu cuerpo, es el mismo Macarena que tu cuerpo. ¿Qué más? Se llama Engaña a las criadas. Señor Ramon, engaña totalmente.
La Macarena, Señor Ramon, it's a start. But I'm off to the cool retreat of Barcelona's Writers' Institute to meet 4 people who live, breathe, and often write about music from the whole of Spain. Songwriter and poet Sabino Mendez, music journalist Nando Cruz, professor of Spanish art and history Alex Fernandez de Castro, and musicologist Silvia Martinez.
In about 2 miles, follow A1N.
Because we have to consider that most countries, not least Spain, are the sum of its parts. But I want to hone in, or try and hone in, on the Spanish sound. What is the Spanish sound? Silvia?
I think the first thing that come out is flamenco. Flamenco maybe is not the most Spanish music, but the most Spanish music for export. Flamenco taints the pop music, the rock music, some gestures in the melodies and the battle rhythms.
Sabino Mendez.
Flamenco was a country music, but now flamenco goes like the blues to the cities, to the big industry cities of Barcelona and Madrid. and then appears something like modern flamenco, the rumba, the modern rumba, and I think it's a very important
In about 1 mile, follow A1M.
Alex, I'd like to ask you, what do you think?
Of course, yes. You did mention that Spanish music to you equals somehow to pasodoble or flamenco. It would be like saying that the Spanish food is necessarily paella or tapas. Definitely flamenco is in our roots, and it has changed and influenced other types of music through the ages. But I would like to, our audience to bear in mind that Spain has gone from isolation to really like opening up from the mid-60s onwards, and especially after the death of Franco. So inevitably Spanish music has adopted many influences from abroad.
It's almost like an animal that you're trying to pin down and talk about music and try and hone in on only one part of the world, but we're going to try and do that. Let's go in from the moment that Franco took control of the country. That was in 1936. I'd like to start with Ay Carmela. Pero nada puedan bombas donde sobra corazón. Bombs can do nothing when there's so much heart. We have to resist. We promise to resist them. Tell us about this era then, Salima.
Well, all these songs are basically war hymns, and messages like these, very romantic messages, and the lyric of Carmela is a good example. Una noche crucé el río, ay Carmela, pero nada puede bombar.
We should do the rumba.
Es que hay dos versiones, hay la lenta y la rápida, pero nada pueden bombar.
Yeah, when we have drunk a lot and then we go to the streets and we think we have to fix this country finally, then we'll sing probably Ay Carmela on the streets.
It shows the aim of the people in Spain. One part has the bones and another part has the heart.
Viva la quince brigada, viva la quince brigada, que se ha cubierto de gloria, ay Carmela, ay Carmela.
To me, Ay Carmela has a very romantic tint to it. One of the reasons why left-wing Spain lost Civil War, it's because a lot of people fighting against Franco were volunteers, they were workers, they were unionists, and that's where the romanticism comes from. George Orwell came here as a journalist and then decided to fight and forget about journalism for a while.
Laura Lee came too, I think.
Yeah,
but these were the International Brigade, and quite young boys from all over the world, well, all over Europe.
Yeah, so the way I picture Ay Carmela is this trench song, like sung at night, maybe by, like people who are volunteering to fight Franco, and, just, I guess, full of fear and full of hope that maybe they could defeat Franco. I mean, I don't know, that's how I picture it.
And I have to say that Ay Carmela, like No Pasarán, all these anthems of the resistance was very, very deep in the collective memory, because the Civil War was 3 years long.
The tune dates from as far back as 1808 and the time of the Peninsular War. It certainly stood the test of time.
So there's a lot of time in which songs help to resist.
Boost morale as well.
It's against all the power of the militaries and the sublimation.
But after the war, all this war disappeared.
Republican songs may have disappeared, but other forms of song remained, including copla. Coplas, from the French couplet, are narrative songs, gritty miniature dramas, or they might deal with love and life on the street. But after the grittier, streetwise references had been censored, copla received official approval. One of the most famous and enduring coplas is La Bien Pagada, the well-paid woman.
When you ask young people, copla sounds like old-fashioned and very conservative, and the music representative of the darkest Spain. And it's not at all, really. Copla was a very left-oriented songs. in the 30s, before the Franco's regime, that talks about prostitution, about extramatrimonial relationships, all the dark side of the life.
Very popular, like just the common people discussing life, and very, very humorous sometimes, right? I mean, kind of like people who had very little in terms of material goods and stuff, and they just try to celebrate life and kind of like make fun of their poverty and their dire circumstances.
So at this point, Nando, I'm going to give you two titles of popular songs, and perhaps you can tell us about them and which ones you'd put in the songbook. La Bien Paga, the well paid, which I assume is about a lady of the night, and Ojos Verdes, green eyes, which again I think is about the lady of the night. Which one should we put into the songbook?
I think we always say La Bien Paga.
I don't know, La Bien Paga, Ojos Verdes, or Tatuaje. I can.
And tell us what Tatuaje is about.
But Tatuaje is a very interesting case, because all these songs about the ladies of night. Tatuaje is a song that at the end of the war, I think is the only song that was sung by the left and the right Spain. Is a song that shared
like
the two bands, like exactly the same of Lily Marlene.
Perhaps La Bien Paga is from the left phone,
from the Republican side.
Maria de la O y Ojos Verdes from the more Franco thought.
Ojos Verdes, it depends, because there is lyrics before the war and the lyrics for Ojos Verdes after the war. Yeah, because the prostitution was very explicit in the first version, and after the war, the National Conservative thoughts changed the lyrics.
It seems that Franco didn't mind what you were singing about, as long as it was popular. He wanted it on his side.
There's always a drama, passion, there's always death, there's always jealous. It's a very strong feeling songs. And another thing very interesting is this, most times coplas were sung by female personages, so it's the women's history.
Franco maybe did more harm than good to Spanish traditional music by favoring flamenco or copla. The generations after Franco obviously reacted against that, because anything that sounded like flamenco or copla sounded like official Spanish traditional music supported by the regime.
Rock music posed a new and expected problem for Franco. The Fab Four were getting everywhere, including Spain, and together with the Kinks, they spawned local imitators, such as Los Bravos and Los Brincos.
The Beatles came to perform against all odds, once in Barcelona, once in Madrid. But anyway, at this point, like when Spain is becoming wealthier and a little bit more open internationally, but still a dictatorship, there's a whole wave of interesting Spanish pop produced that could be very comparable to maybe British pop somehow, but lyrically is super interesting, and I would like to use one example, which is Chica Ye Ye. No te quieres enterar, ye ye, que te quiero de verdad, ye 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 ye. That's Chica Ye Ye. First of all, ye ye would be the Spanish equivalent of pop. You need to understand, Spanish people didn't speak English, but we knew that the Beatles sang, she loves you, yeah, yeah, yeah. So Spanish people equated, okay, so ye ye maybe means pop, right? So Chica Ye Ye would be pop girl, and Coche Ye Ye would be pop car, and Fiesta Ye Ye would be pop fiesta, pop party, right?
In about 2 miles, take the exit 38 on your left.
It was released in 1965. It was in the charts for 27 weeks, and it was performed by someone who was not a pop artist. It was performed by Concha Velasco. She's really an actress who is still alive and active. Basically, it's this Spanish girl saying, I'm sick and tired of waiting for you. I love you, but you don't love me back, because you as a Spanish boy keep daydreaming about foreign girls. That's all you think about, right? So one day you're gonna realize, I'm a worthwhile girl, and you're gonna come back to me asking me to love you back, and I'm gonna say no, right?
Because it's a moment when a lot of tourists is coming to Spain. So
in about 1 mile, take the exit 38 on your left.
A British girl, but this chica says, okay, they won't understand you.
Good luck. Good luck.
And they will go home in September. So.
But what this song represents to me is the lack of self-esteem among Spanish people, and this is something to really reckon with here. We did not recover our self-esteem, I don't think, until we recovered democracy. But at this point in time, nothing about Spain, typically Spanish, was cool.
Because Franco appropriated it, so it's understandable.
So we thought, okay, everything that sounds Spanish is not good. If we want to be modern, we have to sound like the Beatles or the Kings. But not everybody could have records from these bands.
Take the exit 38 on your left.
In Barcelona's gossip quarter, I talked to a shopkeeper. He tells me he only likes Catalan songs, not Spanish. That might not seem very significant.
Keep to the left now.
Under Franco, the Catalan language, along with Basque, was banned. So when in 1968, Lluís Llach wrote and performed his protest song L'Estaca in Catalan, it was only a matter of time before the authorities caught up with him. It's a stunning piece of work. Don't you see the stake or the post to which we are all tied? If we don't free ourselves, then we can never walk. If we all pull, it will fall. It's so Marxist, isn't it? Together, united, the workers of the world unite. And it's an astonishing piece of work.
It's sung in Catalan, another of the 3 languages we have in Spain, and it's an obvious metaphor about Franco and his dictatorship. A very popular song in Catalonia, but also a very popular song in other parts of Europe that also had problems with stacas or dictators. It's not a huge selling hit, but it's a huge,
it's very popular.
It's very popular in the hearts of less people.
It's very important. It's 3x4 really. They're like the old folk songs, a little bit like the hymns of the Civil War.
How dangerous was it to be writing these songs out in the open?
It was very crazy because those times there was censorship. You ask permission to a concert and the police gives you the permission for these songs, not the other ones. And the next concert you had the permission for other songs. Sometimes, for instance, La Estaca could be performed and the other concerts no.
He performed in Cuba in the early 70s and he criticized Franco's regime.
YJ62OTD.
In fact, he was then living in Paris. Catalan people who wanted to listen to Lluís Llach had to go to Paris to listen him perform at theaters in Paris.
In about 800 yards, there is a roundabout. Take the second exit.
Where it was adopted by Solidarity. It was even sung in Tunisia during the Arab Spring. These days it's back in Barcelona, where it's sung by the anti-austerity movement Podemos and by my guests.
In about 400 yards, there is a roundabout. Take the second exit.
Y Vuelta is typical of Spanish music, and that brings us to rumba and Javier Cugat. Cugat was born in Catalonia. He emigrated to Cuba, then popularized Latin music in Hollywood.
Take the second exit.
He was able to make a very commercial, lame version of Cuban music the way I see it. And then that also became popular. I mean, Javier Cugat is well known.
That's kind of harsh. I love Javier Cugat. Come on, Alex.
What I love about this story, though, the story of Spanish music, is this beautiful story of migration and the whole idea of
Voice guidance off. Voice guidance on.
In the 50s and first 60s, when the sons of these immigrants from the south to the north saw here in Barcelona the big Cuban orchestra from the 50s, and they think that this was modernist. Flamenco was an old music, and they tried to mix it.
So that helped ignite this interest in this light rumba, this light flamenco across Spain. There's two types of rumba, as I understand it. Rumba catalana and rumba caño roto.
La de Pérez, sempre ya está muerto, que cantaba rumba catalana.
A woman from Malaga tells me she loves the Catalan rumba of Peret. Peret was a Catalan Romani and is perhaps best known for a song called El Gitano Antón. In southern Spain, a different style of rumba emerged during the dying days of the Franco regime.
They sing about love, they sing about prostitution, they also sing about drugs, because in the 70s heroin came everywhere in Spain. Drugs came very fast and killed a lot of people. And the songs they were singing were songs about poison meaning love or meaning drugs, and it was our earlier version of hip-hop rumba in this sense.
Which brings us neatly to Dame Veneno.
Dame Veneno, yes.
This is an example of a caño roto rumba, which is from the Andalusian region, is that right? Or
yes, the marginal neighborhoods in the big cities like Madrid or Sevilla, like suburbs.
Dame Veneno is give me poison because I want to die. This poison can be love, but you can also suggest or think that this poison can be something harder for your body.
In November 1975, Franco died, and Spain moved into a phase of rapid transition towards democracy. Overnight, mainstream pop became readily accessible, and it was a case of out with the old and in with the new. Well, new to Spain, at any rate. There was an exuberant explosion of creative energy in all the arts, and this became known as La Movida. This was when groups like Radio Futura or Loquillo y Los Trogladitos, Sabino Mendes's group, came into their own and enjoyed a massive following.
With Franco's death, censorship was abolished, and then arrives all at the same time. Elvis, Beatles, Psychedelia, and punk.
The thing is, if you want to be modern, you have to not sound Spanish, and then the only thing to sound not Spanish is go abroad and buy records, and every Spanish band from La Movida has his influence from Six and the Banshees or from David Bowie or from whoever.
So all that protest song movement is left behind. Franco is dead. We can now move on, celebrate democracy, party hard, and just celebrate. Democracy brought self-esteem back to Spain, and interestingly, the end of La Movida coincides with the first examples of traditional Spanish culture recovered by modern Spanish people in a proud way.
What song best sums up this era, do you think, that might make the songbook? Because if you consider that the songs that we want to kind of put in the songbooks are songs that might be still sung in 100 years' time.
Well, the only way to know if a song is very popular is if you go this summer to a small village and then the Verbena Orchestra plays that song. And for example, A Quien Le Importa by Alaska y Dinarama is a good example of all what we're saying. We want to party, but also another element, which is homosexuality. Another thing, obviously away from Franco's mind, but that can now be talked about. So it's a song that says, who cares what I say, who cares what I do, I'm this way and I'm gonna be this way forever. And it's a gay anthem, a movida anthem, and a very popular song.
One of the most popular Spanish singers, if you ask anyone in the United Kingdom, the name that's going to come back to you quite often is going to be Julio Iglesias. Yeah, sure.
Julio Iglesias, you know, he's kind of a little bit the stud, a little bit like the Tom Jones without the funkiness. You know, I think it's the Spanish version of Tom Jones without the funky element, maybe. He's a total 1960s product, you know, so he's kind of like a Franco era, very politically acceptable, romantic, very liked by, you know, the ladies.
Yeah, there are three singers, the male singers in Spanish at the end of the 60s. One of them is Julio Iglesias, the other one is Rafael, and the third one is Serrat.
Yet another Catalan singer-songwriter, Joan Manuel Serrat, is best known for his 1971 hit Mediterráneo and still loved by people on the streets of Barcelona.
Aquí en el Mediterráneo.
Claro.
Esa es muy bonita, mira. Un cantante catalán la canta muy bonita.
Y escondido tras las cañas duerme mi primer amor, llevo tu luz y tu olor por donde quiera que vaya.
When our TV shows and people are asked what's the most famous Spanish song, always comes Mediterráneo.
Que en la piel tengo el sabor amargo del llanto eterno.
It's a great song that explains the Mediterranean way of life. The song says, what can I do? I was born in the Mediterranean, I was born by the sea, I want to pick up a guitar.
Serrat started as a political songwriter at the middle 60s. Serrat was in exile, was banned, and this single became a huge success the whole year on the charts and the first position.
Nací en el Mediterráneo, nací en el Mediterráneo.